This video contains, well, pixelated blood, I guess? Also, do I put up an epilepsy warning? I probably should, right? Yeah, epilepsy warning. Or something. You'll know when you see it. I love Doom 2. It brings me comfort. I also know Doom 2 very well. I've spent a lot of time with it. So I was wondering, how could I destroy that comfort and how could I test my knowledge on it? Well, the best way of doing that is to remove every single texture from every single map. Walls, floors, ceilings, all of it. So I'd only be able to see enemies, items and objects. Sounds mildly difficult, right? Oh, if only it stopped here. You see, in Doom, if there's a texture missing, the empty space will be filled in by whatever graphics were last on screen. This effect is called Hall of Mirrors, due to, well, resembling one. You might have seen it in other games like Half-Life before, but this is where it comes from. Which means that my game will look a little something like this. Yep. Therefore, I've dubbed this challenge Hell of Mirrors. Because trust me, it will be hell. And to torture myself further, the HUD and weapon sprites are also disabled. I can use the map to orientate myself, but to avoid overusing it, it can only be opened for a single second. I'll need to beat the entire game, meaning all 32 levels, on Ultra Violence. I get to keep my items between stages, but I only get to save once per level, you know, to prevent cheesing. Before we begin, I'd like to thank my two scribes, Necrops and Giddy30, who took notes for me while I was streaming. Oh, and please also consider subscribing and donating to my Patreon. But with that out of the way, let's dive into the Hell of Mirrors. My adventure began in Entryway. This one was fairly straightforward as I played it during testing a bunch. My first plan was gathering as many weapons as early as possible because I might not be able to find them later. For now, I had the chainsaw, shotgun and rocket launcher. In Underhalls, the first problem emerged. Since switches only make a sound if they have a switch texture, and I am not using textures, I don't know when I'm hitting any. I can listen for a lack of sound the first time, but if I spam the key, then I will just hear a bunch of... Other than that, this one was also quite easy. The important part is that Sean's got the super shotgun, a lifesaver for later. The Gantlet was next, where at first I couldn't find the required switch, then thought I had to somehow lower it first, all without realizing I had already pressed it. Afterwards, I had trouble staying on the thin platform I'd raised and kept falling off. Surely there's not an infamous map where you have to walk on tight ropes constantly. I also noticed another quirk of the engine. If a wall doesn't extend to the ceiling, I can see enemies behind it. Useful for keeping track of them while they can see me, less useful when I'm trying to shoot them while they remain blissfully ignorant of my attempts. Oh, and I've received a new fear and appreciation of specters. While other enemies simply make the screen more colorful, specters turn into a shadowy blob that casts everything in darkness. Wish they worked like that in the main game. With a chain gun in hand, the focus was next. Aside from more switch troubles and intangible enemies, this one was easy. I did, however, get jump scared by monsters behind doors since they get rendered the second the door opens. I also had my first death when I fell into the toxic goo and panicked. In the waste tunnels, I forgot to delete some textures. Whoops. You'd think this made the game easier, but it honestly didn't. If anything, it made it harder. At the end, I even discovered my first technique. You've already noticed that the more I move around, the more busy my screen gets. This makes it more difficult to distinguish real enemies from fake ones. You know, the whole point of the challenge. However, when I kill a Cataca-COME, its horn is in the exact right position to allow me to walk through it and essentially clear the screen. I call this strategy getting horny. Is it useful? Not in the slightest. I grabbed the plasma rifle and headed into the Crusher. Since I started with barely any HP, my second and third death were right at the start. Miraculously, I managed to get through, and after spending entirely too much time trying to find the important megasphere I needed, I entered the eponymous Crusher room. I had some troubles hitting enemies on higher ledges since I couldn't really see them. However, I realized that my projectiles can. This was not very useful yet, but might be later. Spoilers, it didn't really end up being useful later. After a very tedious timed running and jumping puzzle, I grabbed the blue key and promptly died in the next room after falling into a deadly pit again. Restart. After 3 more deaths at the start, I was back at the crusher. I don't know how I did the jump first try before, because now I just fell off several times in a row. I eventually got the key and returned to the pit that had cost me my life earlier, slowly inching my way around the sides. I accidentally fell into it, but landed on the platform in the middle. It's possible to jump back on the stairs surrounding it if you know where they are. The map wasn't much help, but luckily I knew my way around. Run saved. The rest of the map was uneventful, except for a brief scare on the walkway across the deadly lava, where a shotgunner almost knocked me into it. 6 maps cleared and on to Dead Simple. This one lived up to its name as I only died once. I was hesitant to use my rocket launcher since I couldn't exactly see if there was a wall in front of me. I managed to kill all enemies on my second attempt and walk towards the exit platform, but couldn't. You see, after defeating all the Rectortrons, a donut-shaped stair step raises around it, allowing you to climb to the exit switch. However, we figured that I must have killed 2 Erectotrons at the same time, which caused the stair to raise twice. Kill me. No, literally, I had to restart. 1, 2, 3 more deaths, but I beat all enemies again, only to realize that I still couldn't walk up the stairs. I even made sure to spare at least 1 Erectotron until the end, so what gives? Alright, here's something I learned about those stairs while making my own version of this map for my Into Sandy City squad. Download now, by the way. The way it works is that they don't raise by a specific amount, but the texture's height. A texture that wasn't there, meaning it raised up too high. I tried jumping on it from the platform surrounding it, but it was too tall. I just cheated and no-clipped through. There's got to be a way to do it properly, but let's worry about that later. First, I needed to clear the next map, Tricks and Traps. This is where I realized that I couldn't afford to enter every single room in each map since I'd be wasting my resources. However, there was one item I absolutely had to get. The BFG 9000, the final weapon. Now I only had to worry about collecting ammo. After getting horny and dying in the Cyberdemon room, unrelated, I made my way to the end. Here I was insanely grateful for that single save. Because after exactly 1 attempt to walk over the lowering platforms, which resulted in a death, I just save scummed my way through it. Yeah, not replaying that map 5 times in a row. I had now been playing for around 2 hours and was not even a quarter done, so I stopped the stream and went to bed. My dreams were nightmares, where I was stuck in rooms made of impossible geometry, with horrid creatures creating after images wherever they went. Was this the hell Sandy Peterson had imagined? I can't think of a worse fate. The next session started with the pit, and it started off great. First, I knew about where I had to go, but due to the convoluted nature of the map, I also didn't. There's a lot of randomly placed triggers to open doors, some of which require you to open another door first. Even with textures, this is tedious. There was a particularly annoying jump that I used my save for, just so I wouldn't need to do it again. Unbeknownst to me, this was a huge mistake. In my haste, I failed to press the switch that activates the stairs, so I had to do it twice. Afterwards, I just had to get the yellow key, which was kept in a room with lowering platforms. The mechanic is simple. You hit the switch, it lowers the platform next to you, and you run towards it. Easy when you can see the switches and the platforms. I spent far too long on this part, and even needed some help from my viewers to figure out where the switches were. I was scared to die because I'd have to go all the way back to before doing that jump. Eventually I managed it and even was able to escape the death battle at the end first try, but man, literally the worst map so far. The refueling bays continued the trend of me thinking I knew what I had to do and that turning out to not be the case. My plan was to grab the yellow key, unlock the door, and use my save to make rushing through the Cyberdemon maze easier. I did that before realizing I also needed the blue key, with hundreds of enemies on my tail. I died once but managed to eventually obtain it. But once I rushed back to the maze, the cyber demon blocked my path and killed me. I reloaded the save, redid all of that all over again, and returned the favor, leaving this mess behind me too. The circle of death, or of destruction if you wanna get technical about it, was next. You know, all I can say about this one is that I've developed fresh hatred for Romero and his love of toxic pits. Other than that, it was fine and I did it without any deaths. I also noticed that fake walls are easier to spot if the texture isn't there. Mildly useful. On to the city levels, starting with the factory. Yet another map I figured was going to be easy, until it wasn't. I was off to a rough start because I didn't have enough ammo, meaning I had to scour the map, alerting more enemies and wasting more resources. This resulted in a particularly stupid death via Erectotron. I entered the factory the normal way and wanted to just rush towards the keys, grab them and hightail it out of there. What I hadn't accounted for were the amount of mancubi present, therefore 3 more deaths. Eventually, I had the idea of saving before the mancubi, which was a really good idea. It really softened the blow of me dying 2 more times. I'd initially saved my, save up for the Cacodemon room at the end because I figured it was the hardest. But here's the kicker, I didn't even die there once. Another rare happy end. Next up was Downtown, one of my favorite maps and the first one for which I actually bothered looking up exactly where I needed to go. It's often criticized as one of the more complicated levels, but if you know the way forward, it's quite simple. My main issue was the amount of enemies in the main square, which led to 3 more deaths. One of them was my own fault as I accidentally got crushed when trying to get the plasma rifle. While the experience was horrible, I guess my standards were low enough from the previous map. Eventually, I got to the exit and ended the session for the day. My dreams were erratic and nonsensical, with one terrible face morphing into another, evil eyes gazing at me from the void. I felt like I was becoming one of them, and they were pulling me back into a place I didn't know I came from. Sandy Peterson was there, and he just smiled at me. It was time for stream numero 3. This time, I'd come prepared. I looked at all the maps and planned my routes before playing. This wasn't against the rules, as the main challenge was more getting through the levels than anything. I just didn't want to repeat earlier mistakes. The Inmost Dense was extremely straightforward and only resulted in 1 death, because I wasn't used to the challenge anymore. On to Industrial Zone. You know that meme of those guys from Rick and Morty talking about a 20-minute adventure? Yeah, that's what this reminded me of. My plan was to skip more than 3/4 of the map by taking the secret exit, which I needed to do anyway. I just had to get into the lava, teleport up to the wooden structure, grab the key, activate the switch to the exit, get an invulnerability, and book it to the exit. This was much easier said than done. Getting up to the house wasn't an issue, but fighting the monsters for the key was. This resulted in 2 deaths in a row, and 1 more before I even got there. Eventually, I got the idea to just save before the battle, since I already figured it was going to keep kicking my butt. That turned out to be the case, as I died so many times here. The demons at the start weren't even the main issue, but afterwards I unfortunately had barely any health left, which made the next parts even more difficult. I kept getting sniped by the remaining enemies, especially when trying to get the soul sphere and mega armor I desperately needed. Well, at least the jump onto the platform was fine, right? So, for those who don't know, I have to jump from all the way up here down to this teensy-weensy platform here. A platform you can't even see on your screen from above, thanks to Doom's lack of camera controls. Therefore, I had to rely on the map, which, need I remind you, can only be open for a second. And so I had to redo the jump again and again. I only got around 2 attempts each time because I'd usually die to the lava or the enemies. And every time I did, I had to fight for the key again. My scribe even tried to see if it was possible activating it from below, but no dice. I knew I had to do it, and I did. Even then, I was sore from the battle and knew I wouldn't survive the trek through the lava. But in my excitement, I failed to realize that I'd actually picked up a rat suit on the platform. I got the invulnerability, went back up to the house, jumped to the castle, and exited. My final verdict of this map was just, that sucked so hard. And that was all I needed to say. Woofenstein and Gross were next. Gross? What the hell? Woofenstein and Gross were next, and they were completely unspectacular. I would have visited them either way, since they allowed me to stock up on items. Not much more to say. The same actually goes for Suburbs, my favorite level. Since I know it inside out, I knew exactly where to go. My plan was to clear out the exit first, then grab the key, rush to the other key, and leave immediately. And that was exactly what I did without any issues or deaths. With that map in the bag, it was time for Tenements. I knew this one was gonna be a bit longer as well, but I only died once right at the start. Other than that, it was pretty easy, much like the Courtyard. For that one, I just grabbed the yellow key, then the blue key, and left. It really seemed like the biggest hurdles were behind me. The Citadel was in a similar boat. That level is difficult to navigate even in regular Doom, but it's not so bad when you know which teleporters to take. Actually getting to them was a bit harder though. Still, I only got lost a couple times and abused the hell out of the map feature, but it was over before I even knew it. And finally, I had reached Gotcha, the last stage before the hell levels, and it was as uneventful as the others. I only died once to the Cyber Demon, and while there were a few close calls afterwards, it wasn't that bad. Surprisingly, I managed to get the Cyber Demon and Spider Mastermind to die at the same time. In all my years of playing the game in various forms, this has never happened to me. Maybe it was a sign that things were looking up. And with this, I entered Hell and ended that day's session. 1/3 left. In that night's stream, I found myself 15 years younger, sitting at my computer and listening to music on Windows Media Player and playing solitaire. A wave of nostalgia overcame me. But in the back of my mind, I was aware of the impending horrors that would soon enter my life. I would cherish these sweet moments while I could. And so it had begun, the final session. This time I'd come even more prepared. I had not only looked at all the possible routes, but even tested them to make sure they worked. There was no way this was going to go wrong. Nirvana was my first stop and probably the most straightforward map. I only died once at the start after I got first blinded and then plunged into darkness. I saved right before the room with the lowering walls, and man, I have no idea how you're supposed to do this one if you pistol start the level. My best option was to use rockets, and even then, I died twice. The rest was quite simple, as I could skip the blue key, because Sandy, in his eternal wisdom, made the gap big enough to fit through. My final verdict on this map is just, never mind. The Cataca-COME was next, and god do I hate this stage even in regular Doom. I knew it was going to be hell, and it was. I died 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different times. The worst one was getting sniped by a CHAINGUNNER right after taking a teleporter. The funny thing is, most of that wasn't even because of the challenge. It's just not a very good map in the first place. Luckily, Barrels of Fun was next, and this one came and went without a hitch. Avoiding barrels was pretty simple. I even got the one and only secret first try and didn't die once. If only all maps could be this way. Yeah, if only. Because here's the Chasm, Doom 2's most infamous level, on account of its several tightropes over giant pits. Earlier in the video, I hinted at the fact that not being able to see said tightropes would be a big issue. But luckily, I came prepared. First, I decided to skip more than half the level by jumping into the asset below, running towards the teleporter, and getting back up on a platform. If I now pressed my body right up against the wall, I could land on the walkways easily. Then, by abusing the hell out of the map function again, I slowly and steadily centimetered my way forward. I did fall off twice, causing me to have to restart the whole level. I specifically didn't want to save yet, however, only after I'd reached the teleporter, because the Pinky Room was next. The first run actually went quite well, but I ended up with pretty much no ammo and only 1 HP before being mauled to death. After several reloads, I eventually managed to beat the entire room, grab the key and walk towards the exit before accidentally tumbling into the toxic goo below. One more death to Pinky, but then I was finally done. I held my breath and crawled at a snail's pace over the tightropes, which were getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then I made it safely to the other side. Before going into this challenge, I figured this was going to be the hardest level in the entire game. But I was pleasantly surprised to find out that it wasn't. Instead, that honor goes to a later one. But first came Bloodfalls. This one was fairly unremarkable, though my first death was to a shotgunner, creating a painful reminder on screen afterwards. The only real issue was me getting stuck on the poles in the courtyard, which led to a chain gunner mowing me down. The rest was fine. I even figured out that you can completely ignore the archvile at the end if you just don't shoot your gun, which allowed me to escape to safety easily. Next up was the Abandoned Mines, a very long map with absolutely zero skips, but just full of ways to die. And die I did. A lot at the start and even more in the room with the snaking path. This was also when I realized that getting horny on this map is pretty much unavoidable. Stupid sexy kakusi. At one point I got so fed up with taking things slow that I went in guns blazing, which went about as well as you'd expect. Taking it much slower instead, I got even further, before tumbling off the platform on accident. But finally, I killed the last enemy, grabbed the key, and got the hell out of there. Unlike the Catacombs, most of the difficulty came indeed from not being able to see my way forward, but that still doesn't mean I like this map. Time for Monster Condom. I already knew that this map was going to be extremely simple, except that the beginning was going to suck a lot, and it did. All of my 4 deaths happened in this room alone, mostly due to the hit scanners. After that, I just had to avoid the enemy triggers and rush past the archvile to the exit. It wasn't a terrible experience overall, but I should have really just grabbed an invulnerability sphere from one of the secret rooms. Here comes the spirit world, which I just have nothing to say about. It's one of those maps that's only hard if you don't know the way forward, but which I did. Only died once to an archvile. The living end, the last hurdle before the final boss. And hooray, it was another Romero Pitfall hit scanner fest. Much like in the chasm, I chose to ignore the starting area by jumping into the blood below and taking a teleporter back up. I had alerted every single enemy at the start, but fortunately, they couldn't hit me from this point onward. My first death was quite stupid, as I underestimated my character's speed and barreled off a walkway into lava. After doing all of that again, I got past it and decided to save. That was a pretty cool effect when an archvile blinded me with his flames before appearing from the light like some sort of evil angel. Then I had to get to the worst room in the entire map, the Slough of Despair wannabe. After sneaking past the Baron, I stepped through a teleporter, which took me into a room where hit scanners and revenants immediately opened fire on me. Surprisingly, this wasn't what got me in the end. My first death came after I miscalculated a jump again, leading me to fall into the big chamber in the middle of the map. I took a teleporter, but that just brought me back to the start. I already figured I was screwed, but still took the same route as before and actually got back to where I was. Which ended up not mattering, as the Baron hit me straight in the face with a fireball. My next death was even stupider, as I panicked after getting hit while jumping over a gap, causing me to ricochet into the lava below. What happened after was equally infuriating. I got past all those obstacles and finally took the teleporter that leads to the big mountain in the middle. But remember those enemies I alerted right at the start and didn't take care of? Yeah, turns out they can hit me after all. Then I died to the Baron again, only to make it back up to the mountain and die to a chain gunner. At this point I was getting pretty disheartened. I'd been streaming for almost 3 hours, I was that tired and still getting over my cold. I didn't know if I could even finish this level. But with a lot of effort, I got to the teleporter again. I immediately opened fire on anything that moved and waited. Could those Cacodemons hit me? No, I was safe. The coast was seemingly clear. I climbed up the steps, careful not to fall. When suddenly, bullet impacts. A chain gunner was still alive. I panicked. He was too far away from me to hit him, but not for him to hit me. Rockets wouldn't help either. But in a stroke of luck, he decided to walk down the stairs, getting closer to me. I almost accidentally fell off the platform again, but I managed to shoot him instead. It was over. Carefully dodging the barrage of Mancubus fire, I climbed back up, before dashing past the Cyberdemon hole and escaping. This was pain. The worst map in the entire challenge. But it was behind me. Now I just had to defeat the final boss. I did one quick non-canonical attempt, but I knew I was too tired. It had to wait until next time. And so the stream that was supposed to be the last one came to an end. My dreams that night were empty and silent. Such a silence I had never known. Peterson's hand reached out to me, but instead of grasping mine, it held my face tight, trying to suffocate me. I woke up gasping for air when I realized I hadn't even gone to sleep yet. The icon of sin, the final boss, the only thing standing between me and sweet, sweet victory. For the uninitiated, the icon of sin isn't a giant monster that moves around like the others. It's actually a massive wall looming over you. A massive wall with a tiny hole in its head through which you need to shoot at least 3 rockets. A massive wall made of textures. I repeat, textures. There are no textures. I can see the hole. This truly was the ultimate test of my skills. How could I defeat something I couldn't even see? Was it even possible? Alright, I have to cut the spiel. Yes, it was, and it wasn't even particularly hard. I mean, it was, but that was mostly due to the fight sucking in the first place. So much enemy spam. I got caught on every single thing, especially the annoying lost souls. But it was doable, I knew it. The only problem was that you can only hit the hole if you're on the same height. There's a platform that can raise up, but once it hits the top, you're too high up. Meaning you have to fire a rocket at the exact right time as the platform is moving up, or when jumping back down. I got on the lift and saved the game. I only get to save once per map, but I also get to load that save as many times as I want. So I just save scummed my way through it. Yeah, I don't care. If I fell off, reload. Didn't hit a shot, reload. Enemy blocked my way, reload. Eventually I got lucky. I hit a rocket going up. 1. As I was riding the platform back up, another rocket. 2. And as I fell back down again, almost resigning to the fact I'd have to restart, with frustration and rage building up inside of me, I hit one more rocket. 3. And so it was done. The monster shrivels up before me and hell alongside it, and I lean back in my chair, the challenge completed. What an adventure this has been. It really made me appreciate just how useful it is to actually see where you're going. But it's not quite over, is it? I said I'd revisit that simple to see if it was possible without cheats, didn't I? Well, I didn't have the save file anymore, so I just loaded the map via console and gave myself all weapons. Yeah, I guess it's technically cheating, but I had already beaten it. Plus, attempting to pistol start the map took almost as long as the Icon of Sin did. But I'm happy to report that yes, it is possible to beat it. You just need to stand on the stairs before they raise up. Now the challenge was truly over and I signed off for the day. In my final dream, I sat at peace with Peterson and we watched the moon over the Sandyford Junction. So, to answer my question, can I beat Doom 2 without any textures? Yes, but at the cost of my time, patience, sanity, and eyes. and now I shall rest for 1,000 days. In the meantime, please tell me what you thought about this challenge. I'm not really someone who does challenges like these, but this was, well, it wasn't fun, but it was interesting. I'd like to again thank Necrops and Giddy30 for being the scribes for this challenge. I couldn't have done it without you. If you've liked this video, I have other Doom related content on my channel, so check it out. I might do another challenge like this, but for Doom 1. I'm not really a Twitch streamer, I just do it on my Discord server so I can actually talk to people. So if you're interested, the link to join my server is below. And if you want to support my escapades, then you can leave a like, subscribe, and even consider donating to my Patreon. Anything is appreciated. But for now, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and goodbye.